what we want to move on to now is the panel discussion, and generally focused around various questions of how Latvian companies can grow and succeed, how they can improve their network connections and relations with the Valley. And first I will introduce the remaining members of the panel who haven't been introduced yet. So to the Prime Minister's left is Dr. Rubitskis. He's the rector for the Riga Technical University. Professor Rubitskis served as Vice Rector for Research since 2000 and Rector since 2010. He has a doctorate in engineering as a full member of the Latvian Academy of Sciences. He's been awarded 22 patents and has published 342 scientific papers. To the left of him, Dr. Burton Lee, lecturer in European Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the Stanford School of Engineering. Dr. Lee is a recognized expert on innovation ecosystems, venture finance, innovation policy, with particular expertise in Europe, Latin America, and the USA. He has 15 years of leadership and advisory positions with venture-backed technology startups, corporations, VCs, angel groups, universities, incubators, and so forth around the world. He completed his PhD in mechanical engineering at Stanford University and his MBA at Cornell. To his left, representing Exogen, Mr. Greg Schenkman. He's the founder and managing partner of Exogen Capital, a private equity firm that invests in carve-outs and large-cap startups. One of Exogen Capital's portfolio companies is Exogen Services, the application outsourcing provider based in Latvia. Previously, Mr. Schenkman co-founded Genesis Telecommunication Laboratories, the world's leading provider of contact center software, and served as CEO and chairman. In 1999, Genesis was sold to Alcatel for $1.9 billion. And at the end, Dr. Andres Vasiljevs, co-founder and chairman of the board of Tilde, who I mentioned before, which is an R&D and localization company for smaller languages. He received his PhD at the University of Latvia. He's also a member of Intergovernmental Council and Bureau for the UNESCO Information for All Program, IFAP, and a member of the Commission of the State Language of Latvia. So, with everyone introduced, I'd actually like to start on a positive note and ask those who are involved in the businesses from Latvia especially, what are some of the key ingredients that would be leading to the success stories that we have to date? Maybe starting with you, Mr. Schenkman.
Thank you. We've been investing in Latvia circa 2000. So it's been a very interesting time. As you can see by evolution of the graphs behind me, there was a lot of tribulations, certainly economically. What we found, as with any other globalized organizations, it's very interesting new experience, especially new emerging countries that came from significant control from a much larger economies such as Russia and Soviet Union. And they were going through quite a significant transition. And obviously by year 2000, it was truly a free country at that time. However, the labor force and understanding of a free markets was still quite developing. And what we found to be probably most interesting and most rewarding for us is that regardless of the turbulence that the economy experienced, we found a lot of stability in workforce and the quality of workforce and a huge amount of reliability, which probably both cultural as well as geographic, which came quite surprising. For those who are familiar with outsourcing markets, and especially with software development, stability is extremely important because you tend to invest a lot in people and you tend to stand to gain the benefits of that investment in a lot of years. Being a local player and having probably a reasonably new experience is what was happening, we were quite concerned whether the fluidity of the workforce was going to be quite significant without a lot of research compared to India, China, or other large geographies. We had no idea what to expect. To a great pleasant surprise, we found that stability was unshakable. We have a large amount of investments throughout the world, and we found that stability and quality of workforce was unprecedented. So we to a certain degree, took a big bet. And that bet more than pay off. We grew the economy, our own personal economy, quite significantly. I think from inception, the scale tripled and the value exceeded that by far. So the investment has been a very good investment. Obviously, we've been a long-term player. We continue to be a long-term players. And without hesitation, I could recommend both quality and stability of workforce and the kind of results we achieved. We're quite grateful for both education that people receive in that country and obviously the cultural aspects of behavior that have been really exemplary. Like always, there are issues, being established players, there are issues of taxation, and being part of EU, obviously, it also has its own certain downsides. However, on the net basis, we continue to be very positive. We expect to stay in this geography for foreseeable future. It's a centerpiece of our European investment strategy from output perspective. So all in all, it's been a very positive experience.
Thank you. And Dr. Vasilyevs?
Yeah, about these key ingredients for success, I would agree with Greg that, of course, it's highly skilled workforce, or IT and software engineers. I represent IT industry, and we have really very good, excellent experts in the field. And that's thanks to our strong universities, like Riga Technical University, represented at this panel by the rector, and University of Latvia, what specializes in some fields. They have world leadership, like in business process modeling, what helps to develop very innovative software. And it's also spirit of innovation, and especially to use those opportunities provided by the internet and online services, what opens the world for a small country like we are, and for the small players in our countries, we can reach the global markets using that. And this is also because we do not have all very old and established companies in Latvia. The older companies have about 20 years of experience only, and there are a lot of young companies, and those drive innovation and this innovative spirit. And another important aspect is that government is putting efforts in modernizing public services in Latvia, creating new e-service infrastructure, providing internet access and information services for free in all public libraries of Latvia, even in the most remote rural areas. You can get excellent broadband internet access and free information services and access to university digital libraries. And the final ingredient is that we are a relatively small country, and number of companies started developing products and services for customers in our countries with low investments, close ties with customers, and by gaining competence, experience, maturing products and services, we were able to apply that competence, expanding to other countries outside Latvia and globally.
Great, thanks. So you mentioned universities, so I'd like to ask, focus in on that and ask the question, what are the most valuable activities for universities to do that they can contribute? Maybe Burton, if you could start commenting, what your thoughts?
Latvian universities or Silicon Valley universities?
Universities in general that might apply to Latvia.
Well, so I lead a new initiative out of the engineering school on European entrepreneurship and innovation. We work with European universities, but also governments, corporations, investor groups, startups, across the broad European innovation ecosystem. Part of what we've been doing is bringing to certain European universities new competencies and capacities, both in teaching and research, that they haven't had yet, specifically, for example, product design. That's a strength of ours here at Stanford in mechanical engineering. It's oftentimes a capability that's lacking in many European universities, and it's vital to developing a long-term sustainable innovation ecosystem. Universities play a key role in Europe, as they do here, in development of intellectual property that can form the basis for new ventures, form the basis for new products. It's not just about startups, it's about where the intellectual property comes from. If you don't get the universities engaged locally in your national and regional innovation ecosystem, if you don't get them aligned and on board with generation of world-class intellectual property and getting that out the door into the hands of entrepreneurs and companies and investors, it's very, very difficult to build a scalable strategy for your country in the long term. Where we see European universities in many cases not performing at a global level is they tend to be based upon mostly teaching models as their primary mission. Here at Stanford, MIT, Berkeley, research is our first mission. And secondly, the incentives provided to the professors and the students are not really aimed at incentivizing getting the technology out the door, getting the intellectual property into the commercial marketplace. So one of their great challenges is changing the culture of universities, reforming the university system so it's much more open to the outside world, lowering the barriers to cooperation with industry, and becoming part of the global innovation system. Part of that is also choosing research topics and areas that really are at the cutting edge in nanotechnology, in biology, and information sciences, so that the intellectual property they generate is not duplicating what is already coming out of US, Japanese, Korean universities, but really is world-class and ready to hit the market with the ground running. So universities play a very key role in the European system. They need to be strengthened. They need to be funded at higher levels. The annual Stanford budget is $3.8 billion. The top European universities are generally funded at maximum 1 billion euros. Tallinn Technical University, their annual budget is 150 million euros. Okay, so this has to be part of the national strategy for every country, strengthening the roles of the universities, giving the rectors enhanced autonomy, helping the professors choose good research topics that will generate intellectual property at a global level, and incentivizing the students. Students play a very important role also to create startups, take entrepreneurship seriously.
Thank you. Dr. Rybitskis, your thoughts, some very appropriate comments for you.
Thank you. Of course, I can agree, and I 100% agree with what Professor Lee was telling now, but just I like to give you a very small introduction what Riga Technical University is. We were founded in 1862, and next year we shall celebrate 150 years. And then we were first technical or polytechnical university in Tsarist Russia that time. Now we are the biggest university of technology in Baltic region, and our student number is around 17,000, including 500 PhD students. And we have more than 100,000 graduates. And 3 leading persons in Latvia are our alumni. It's our Prime Minister, our State President, and also President of Bank of Latvia. All of them are alumni of Riga Technical University. And as we are now in business school here, we in Riga Technical University also have a business school, Riga Business School. This year we celebrated 20 years of this school, and the program was created with help of Buffalo University from the United States and Ottawa University from Canada. Well, now about how university and what is role of university in business development. Basically, I think it's my opinion and that university of technology must have three main tasks. First, of course, it's to do scientific research, basic and applied. Second, to prepare specialists for industries, of course. And third, very important task to create innovation flow and to industry and to start new high value added businesses or companies. It can be a duty of university. And in this way, we are changing university from so-called research university to third generation university. I think this is new activity. And also in Riga Technical University, we are willing to do that, and we already are doing that. And what is key for us, it's internationalization of research and study processes, both of them, then continuous and active work with business world, especially with alumni and specialized international business networks. I mean, in different areas, in electronics, in software engineering, in pharmaceuticals, and so. I think the 3G university is our future. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, so we know that Silicon Valley is unique in its concentration of innovation, networking, and entrepreneurship. And like many other countries, Latvia, of course, wants to improve connections and collaboration with the Valley. So what role do you see government playing in this effort to improve communications with the Valley? John, maybe you have some comments.
Well, first of all, I think to pick up on earlier points, it's very important that the universities be encouraged to connect to business, whether it's business in Latvia or business here in the Valley. And, you know, that's not been the norm. It's not the norm even in the US, and in Japan it was more or less illegal until quite recently. So encouragement from the government to the universities, a promise that the money they bring in will not simply be cashed out by the government in reduced grants, I think is something important. Something that I read about in the paper 2 days ago, the country of Luxembourg was, their crown prince was here in the Valley, and he was setting up an agreement under which the Luxembourgeois government would fund an effort by PwC, the accounting firm, to help connect Luxembourgeois business into Silicon Valley. But I understand you may have already started that procedure.
We had that meeting this morning.
You had that meeting this morning. The other thing is that, and I simply don't know how much is going on in this direction, my own experience with some countries in Southeast Asia is that really good consular people in the commercial side can be very helpful in connecting businesses in two countries. And I've done some stuff with the Indonesian consulate here in San Francisco in exactly that sort of activity. Mm-hmm. And I think I simply have no knowledge of what your New York or LA consulates may be doing in that area, but it's something that can be valuable.
Great, thank you. Dr. Lee Burton?
If you don't have universities cooperating closely with industry, really becomes very difficult to move them to the next stage for a number of reasons. And one of the challenges that European universities have is they've been tasked with the role of providing consulting services to many of their local companies, but those services, the financial return which is provided back to the university is often at a very low level, so it may not be attractive for the university, but it also means that the university spends, in some sense, far too much time working with local companies that may not be at a global level. And so it provides relatively few learning opportunities for the universities. Where I think European universities would find much more benefit is developing collaborations with global multinationals, tapping into the networks of Cisco, Hewlett-Packard, Intel, SAP, for example, Rolls-Royce, don't have to be just American multinationals, and getting inside, getting their PhD students inside, understanding what are the real problems that these major multinationals face, getting the researchers and management from those companies, those corporations to come visit your laboratories, build out collaborations. That's been a very successful model in the Stanford Engineering School. For example, my own PhD research here was funded in part by Hewlett-Packard and by Daimler, so I spent time in Stuttgart during my PhD time. We don't really see in many European countries these strong, long-term, deep industrial collaborations working with the top companies. This becomes a very important training ground for training top technical people from the universities, also professors to understand what the problems of industry are, breaking down the barriers between the ivory tower and industry. And in many cases, these universities have been set up with very old models, sometimes under the old Soviet system, of strong segregation of capital and intelligentsia. These are very difficult cultural and institutional barriers to overcome, which take sometimes decades. But they have to be overcome because if you don't break down the walls into the individual laboratories, your universities are going to have a hard time competing at a global level. Let me give you one quick example. I was in Gdansk in November speaking at the Polytechnic there, and I met with the professors of the mechanical engineering department. One of them told me that one of his PhD students was working at a Swiss company, and that he had called up the Swiss company and asked the chief executive officer not to offer his PhD student a job at that company, so that the student would come back to Poland and work in the laboratory. Now, I was shocked that you actually would have professors, in effect, sabotaging, not out of any meanness of spirit, but effectively intervening in the career choices, career opportunities of students to bring them back. But it also just reflected a lack of understanding by the professors in the Polytechnic at Gdansk that getting industry experience, getting their laboratory connected into the top companies in Switzerland, elsewhere in Europe, simply wasn't important. If I may, just another quick example. When I was working in Ireland a year and a half ago, having lunch with the dean of the Trinity College Dublin Engineering School, one of his faculty remarked that he saw no value in bringing Siemens from Munich to work with them in Dublin. So these walls have to be breached. These are attitudes common across many universities in Europe. And until you really get close cooperation and collaboration between the universities, you're going to find Europe underperforming and far behind Asia and the United States in the innovation scene.
Thank you. And I know, Prime Minister, you need to leave in just a minute. If you have some final comments on the role of government, maybe, before you leave.
Thank you. Maybe really just a very few comments. Something we are trying to do right now also relating with linking of both highest and professional education to the labor market demand. Because something you mentioned with this disconnect between academia and real labor market, it's something we also have in Latvia. We produce way too many specialists in some industries and not sufficient in others. So this is one very important topic now for a higher education reform, really, and also for professional education reform, to get those two together. And our feeling is that we need to work much more with entrepreneur organizations to make sure that they are the ones which are defining the demand, so that we can meet it through the reallocation of budget positions, through starting new programs, closing old programs, or amending programs, so that really we need those kind of experts which are really needed for a labor market. And second, also, while linking universities with businesses, again, we use the support of EU funds, available European Union financing, in order to promote projects where universities work together with businesses in developing new projects. We have, quite a few tens of millions dollars allocated especially for this program, which for a small country may be a sizable amount of money, actually, to encourage both universities and businesses to work together, to use those EU grants, and actually to find ways how together they can create new products and value added. Thank you.
Thank you. So, so I'd like to turn to a question about a concern that I've heard quite often voiced in Latvia about a worry that if you have too close ties with a place like the Valley, that there'll be a brain drain. All the smart people will leave and they'll come and live in this sunny, beautiful place, and that'll be actually a negative on the Latvian economy. So maybe you have some comments on that, and maybe Mr. Schenkman, you have a large labor force there. So, you know, are they all leaving? If not, why not?
First of all, as I mentioned, culture of this country is quite remarkable. People extremely loyal, and obviously if they left, they could have left back to work in Silicon Valley, but they also could have left any other place. We have not experienced that as greatly. I also want to resonate very much with your comments. Especially Riga Technical University has some unique capabilities that, in my opinion, could be developed in a world-class energy. As you know, Silicon Valley works in sort of this energetic circle where lots of experts come together to create something extremely valuable and leapfrog the markets, opportunities, capabilities that allows the sort of way above GDP growth in the particular areas of capabilities. I actually think I could not say more about this particular university. We happen to have a fair amount of students from your institution that focus on particular process research and process capability that in our particular vernacular have been extremely important. And having to grow into a global scale, because we tend to deal with the Fortune 100 capabilities, they need a completely different kind of value proposition that typically a 2 million people country can develop. And having to have that very specific expertise been nothing but a godsend for us, because we were able to hire a number of local experts that were able to deal with the Fortune 100 problems. That is quite unique. We have a number of other capabilities, including places like China, where that basic capability is missing. Similar things that we could say probably about even some Russian capabilities as well. So, having said that, that has not happened. I don't know if we started a lot of new companies or people that left our institution or company became a local entrepreneur. I don't have any research on that. But I suspect there is a lot of strengths in believing in its local culture and believing in its local capabilities. And I think people not as willing to leave the country because of the same stability I already spoke to. So I actually don't think it's a real threat. And as a matter of fact, what I have seen, people that did leave actually brought with themselves a lot of new ideas and came back to the country to start the new capabilities. So I think having a local strong belief system and stability really fosters that innovation. So That's at least not what we've experienced.
Last week, there was a major delegation from Denmark led by the Minister of Science, Technology, and Innovation with all the chancellors, rectors of all the Danish universities. On June 20, the Ministry of Commerce in Madrid announced the opening of a new Spain Tech Center here in the fall. Last year, the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, was here. The year before that, President Ilves from Estonia. The Innovation Center Denmark, just down the road, is expanding their incubation facilities. The Dutch consulate last year opened up a new incubator. The message here is that Europe is broadening and deepening its engagement with Silicon Valley, bringing over more companies. Why do they do this? It's not because they want to support the California economy. They're doing this out of enlightened self-interest because they understand that the best way to, one, educate their entrepreneurs is to get them with the best investors and the best training, which we offer here in the Valley, coaching, mentoring. But more fundamentally, the best way to grow jobs back home is to bring your startups here. So this is really not well appreciated or documented, but Silicon Valley is responsible for the creation of tens of thousands of jobs across Europe through our startups, through our corporations. And if you want to get your own economy jump-started, if you want to start changing the culture of your universities, you begin engaging, bringing your students here, your professors, your companies. It's the shortest track, shortest way to institutional reform, culture change, but also to the creation of new jobs back home.
If I may add,
Sure.
I'm originally came from that part of the world in the first place. So if you want an example of how some of the jobs gets created back home, would be our institution. So I mean, we originally came from Eastern Europe, and both with my partner, obviously came back to hopefully create a lot of value for the countries.
Yep. Yeah.
A couple of recent examples. So some of the earliest investors in Skype were from Draper Fisher Jurvetson here in the Valley. Rovio, who many of you know is responsible for Angry Birds, recently closed a $42 million round with major participation by Silicon Valley investors. Not a single job from Rovio is leaving the Helsinki area. They're all staying in Finland.
Great. So, so we know the Latvian market as a consumer market with 2 million people is very small, and for any business to grow large, it needs to export products or services. So, I wonder if you can comment on how some advice or experience in how Latvian companies might find and grow niches that they could exploit to grow their services, and maybe Dr. Vasiljevs about how Tilde sees that.
Yeah, let me share our experience. Our company started 20 years ago when PCs started to be used in a lot of fields of activities. And at that time, there was no language support for our languages. It was not possible to write in Latvian language or to get spell checking or another basic language support on computers. And so then, yeah, we saw that as opportunity and developed our products and services to adapt software for Latvian needs. And when we got approached by companies, big names like Adobe, HP, Oracle, asking, oh, you have this competence in your language. Could you help to localize our products for your market? And after first successful projects, we said, oh, you did an excellent job. Could you help us for your neighboring countries, for Estonia and Lithuania, with also small languages, and you know them better than we from States. And that's how we expanded. And when we realized that, yeah, it's not just about basic language support. Human-computer interactions is going to become more natural using human language for expressing your needs. And machine translation is important to cross language barriers across global world. And this is another opportunity. And our expertise in these small languages, Latvian, Lithuanian, Estonian, is unique, but it's too small in the global world. How about making partnership with other companies and with universities, with experts in other languages in other countries around Europe. And we established this partnership with, actually currently we partner with about 30 universities across Europe in innovative research and development products for language technologies. And it's not just about research and development of great products. You need access to the global market. And it's tremendously hard for small companies to reach global markets with such specific products. And here, cooperation with a global player like Microsoft was essential. And we got an excellent opportunity during a visit of Latvian president in the United States. He had a meeting with Microsoft CEO, Mr. Steve Ballmer, and he invited us to join his team at this visit, and we had an opportunity to sell this or to tell about our expertise and to this idea to the Microsoft CEO, and he got interested in this, and that's how this Language Shore cooperation project started, about bringing together best minds across Europe in local universities and developing innovative technologies what can serve language needs for global players like Microsoft.
Okay, great. So I don't know, Prime Minister, you may need to leave for your next meeting. We'll continue for about 10 more minutes, but I'd like to thank you for your participation today, and wish you the best in the rest of your travel through the US.
Well, thank you very much once again for organizing this event, and at the end I also wanted to present to the Stanford University book on how Latvia came through the financial crisis, written by Anders Aslund and myself.
So we'll continue for 10 more minutes. We just need to let the Prime Minister leave for his next meeting. Thank you very much. Yes. So I'd like to finish off the sort of scheduled questions and open up for the audience to ask questions in just 1 minute with one last. If each of you can sort of name if you had to prioritize what would be the most important thing that needs to change and needs to happen to help high-tech businesses in Latvia grow and work with the Valley, what would a priority be? Maybe I'll start at the other end, Dr. Vasiljevs. What would be the number one thing that would need to change for high-tech businesses like yours to grow faster, be more successful?
To go faster, just one particular aspect that could help us is to find new prospective partnerships, to establish partnerships in states, and here in Silicon Valley region would be to open permanent representation of Latvian IT industry in Silicon Valley, and that's exactly what's happening these days. And we are very optimistic about opportunities opened by this.
Okay. Mr. Schenkman?
Well, I think I already alluded to this once. I think finding its niches, I think the labor force in general is extremely innovative, open-minded. I find change is to be refreshing for the country. The country is very young, and the population is very young, and it really does not understand the barriers, which is a great thing. The value is to try to find some sort of energy and capability that already exist and evolve it further. And obviously understand how to partner. Sometimes being in a small country, you have a very localized vision. You really don't see the big world out there, and you're really limited sometimes by your own environment. I think one of the biggest learning curves I had when I came to Silicon Valley is to think globally immediately. It's just the nature of the beast here. This is how we do things here. We don't think there are real limitations. We make big global bets, sometimes without a reason, but we do. And sometimes that lack of fear really helps you succeed. Having to go through a lot of changes is probably a lot of experience. So the biggest thing is not to fear. Understand what you're good at and really go aggressively out and go get the new markets, because world is truly without borders anymore. And having a very few individuals, and again, Silicon Valley is a perfect proof, you don't need a lot of people to be extremely successful and extremely valuable. I mean, the new economic reality today is that fact very few people could make a big difference. Having that belief and capability in your mind is paramount. So I think just go forward without fear would be my best
Great, thank you.
suggestion.
Dr. Lee?
Of critical importance is building the bridges. Specifically, you have to start increasing the number of people from Latvia coming here on a regular basis, whether it's from established companies, from startup companies, students, government people, and university leaders and professors. Over and over again, what really changes culture, what really changes people's minds is coming here and spending time here, whether you're Italian, German, Dutch, Irish, et cetera, et cetera. So one is building out the body flow, the people flow at all levels, providing financial support for doing that on an ongoing basis. And then something that the Estonians have found very, very effective is establishing a permanent representation here. Enterprise Estonia has had a person here for over 4 years, representing Estonia, building the Estonian network, making introductions for Estonian startup companies, universities into the Silicon Valley investor community, startup community, incubators. You have to also organize the presence here so that when you get people coming here, they know how to connect and have a local network. So also the important part of that is also building the network of Latvians, Latvian Americans here in the Valley to support that bridge from this end.
Okay. Dr. Dombrovskis?
Yeah, of course, internationalization, I already told that we must go to this direction and no way around. But also locally, I think it's very important that those funds coming to university from state or municipality or private sector basically cannot be interrupted or reduced. Normally, they must grow up. And during this crisis, there were very hard situation, but now we are feeling a little bit better. And what I like to tell that to fulfill this third task of university, to be third generation university, of course, government must have some expenses at the starting moment to reach some goal in 4, 5, 6 years period, and I hope that our government will do it.
Great, thanks. Any last piece of advice, John?
I think that it's tremendously important to do what Rector Rebikis is already doing. This idea of the third generation university, one that is connected into the business and community, that is connected into the world, and that sees its role as in part nurturing and creating businesses. Stanford has been very unusual in that we've been doing that for quite a long time. The engineering school more than the business school, because most of the ideas come out of engineering and science. But the business school is trying hard to do it too. And it makes us so much better. We're stronger, and we're better researchers as a result, and better teachers as a result of our connections to the real world. The ivory tower is a rather sterile place.
Andrews, could I add something?
Sure.
I didn't really answer the question about the role of government, and unfortunately the Prime Minister's already left, so hopefully the rest of you will be able to pass this on back to Latvian government representatives. So what I saw in Ireland when I was working with the Prime Minister's task force there is for a change of course, for introducing something as fundamental as innovation into a culture, into an economy that's never had it, oftentimes the Prime Minister's personal backing of the agenda is extremely important. Important to get the attention of the senior business leaders, the leaders in Parliament, the ministers, and the media. It's the power of the podium and the pulpit. Having the Prime Minister talking about the importance of innovation sends a signal throughout the government system, throughout the ministries, throughout the universities that change is coming, you better get on board, and that this is important for the country, and that this is a long-term focus and area of importance. Concretely, so there is the media element and power of convincing and persuasion. Concretely, governments can play a very important role in funding of research at universities, research that can be commercialized, play an important role in procurement of new products and services coming from startups. In many countries in Europe, there's a hesitancy, a real reluctance to buy new products and services from startup companies instead of from the established firms, because there's a fear that they'll disappear in a year or two. Well, that's precisely what happens when you don't buy products and services from them. They do disappear in a year or two. So change in procurement policies is very important. Thirdly, the government role is extremely important for making sure all the players are at the table. The investors, the entrepreneurs, the universities, the corporations, the senior ministers, the parliament, making sure who is at the table, oftentimes breaking down these old barriers between ministries, setting an example for coordination, cooperation, communication between ministries where there hasn't been before is extremely important. So an active Prime Minister really can make a huge difference in changing, quickly pivoting the country to move into this innovation area.
Thank you.